My name is Amanda Ring, and this is Flight of the Feminine. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark, to awaken your womb and heart consciousness. I'm inviting you to open to the realms of energy and spirit, to evoke empowerment and create sovereignty. As a sacred soul, each one of you are on this journey through life. Welcome back to Flight of the Feminine. I'm Amanda Ring, your host. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark, womb and heart consciousness, the realms of energy and spiritual expansion, empowerment and sovereignty as the sacred soul each one of you are on this journey through life. In our last episode, I shifted us in a bit of a different direction, but one I feel still is very much connected to the feminine archetypal energies of intuition, connection with the earth and energy, and the fascinating world of dowsing. In that episode, I touched on the basics of what dowsing is as a general practice, a method, and a skill that everyone has the capacity to develop. So if you're hopping into the show series here and haven't listened to episode 11 yet, you're still okay to flow along with us here and carry on listening and maybe pop back and have a listen to that episode, especially if dowsing is new to you. I'm sure your curiosity will be piqued even more after listening to that and today's show. In this episode of Flight of the Feminine, we are going to expand through the topic of dowsing to share more about the specifics of earth energies, the various types, how these are changing, how these energies are influencing and shifting human consciousness, and why this is important for you to know. As I mentioned in the previous episode, I discovered the world of dowsing through my practice as an energy practitioner and a shamanic guide in my work with Seven Feathers. However, the more experiences I have with dowsing and earth energies, the more it is affirmed for me that I have been attuned to earth and cosmic energies since I was a child, which I'll hazard a guess will be true for many of you also listening now. Dowsing is a fascinating way to gather information, locate items, communicate with energy, support energy, and influence energies that are beyond our five senses, which we cannot see through our biological vision. Yet many of you and I can sense through our somatic nature and our psychic sensing. It is both an art and a science. You might have heard the term water witching, and many of our elders in rural communities know of it as such, and to help with locating water. And yet it is so much more. There's often tools used like copper rods or a Y-shaped rod, pendulums, bobbers. Yet, the greatest instrument is you. As I continue on my own personal and professional journey with dowsing, I was synchronistically guided to Rory Duff and his incredible work. I am beyond delighted and honored to welcome a very special guest to Flight of the Feminine today. And that is Rory Duff. He is joining us all the way from his home region of southern England. Rory began his work and his working life as a geologist in the gold mines of Africa. And after a moment of synchronicity himself, he learned about the Austrian mystic Rudolf Steiner, at which point he moved back to the UK, where he pursued a career in coaching, training, and speaking. And in the last 5 years, he switched to researching geobiology, which is the study of how the earth affects life for all of us. Rory is one of the leading pioneers in the world in understanding of the lays or ley lines and earth energies, how their frequencies can be highly beneficial as well as dangerous. And he has come up with the first ever classification of Earth energies, which is now used by thousands of people worldwide. He has mapped more of these lines around the world than anyone else, and the first to fully map all of the major energy lines that could be found over an area of 200 square kilometers. Something which I recall him saying took him about an hour a day for 6 years. Rory was also the first person to rediscover the most powerful Earth lines in the world, the Emperor Dragon lines. There are only 6 pairs, and 1 pair runs across the United States. In his talks, he explains how and why these particular lines come and go over the centuries and the effects that this has on humankind. And it was these studies that led him to finding the link to the Knights of Templar, if that's something you're familiar with, and their most sacred location. In addition to that, he is the first person to ever offer up a viable scientific hypothesis as to what these energies actually are and how they are generated within the Earth. And what I find equally fascinating is how this links with universal consciousness. So welcome, Rory, and thank you so very much. Is there anything else that you would care to add to your introduction before we hop in?
Goodness, Amanda, thank you very much for all that you've said there. But no, there's really nothing else I should add. That's very good.
Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me today as well.
Well, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing. I know how devoted you've been to the Earth and these frequencies and learning about and learning from these energies and teaching others like myself. I had the great pleasure of traveling to the south of England to study with you in 2022, and it really opened so much more for me. And my intention for inviting you here today is to help others who are really curious about Earth energies to gain a better understanding of what we're even talking about when we're saying Earth energies. So, and it's sort of the different classifications and how you've come to discover how is the Earth emanating these frequencies? Like what is going on and why is it so important? So let's start there. So why don't you go ahead and explain to us, what is a ley?
I'd like to do that, Amanda, but first, if I can just go back a bit, you said about why is it so important to me and why is it so important to us? And I'd just like to start with that.
Absolutely.
And go on to that, because
Please,
the
yes.
world is facing some huge dilemmas right now. And for me, one of the biggest ones is whether or not you believe in God or not. And if you don't believe in God, then there's a whole science out there waiting for you, which is nice, materialistic and reductionist. And it doesn't explain how intelligence came to arise around the universe. Now, I don't hold with that science. On the other hand, if you have God and he exists and continually creates all things around you, you need at least a scientific explanation that explains that, or at least, in the very least, how God operates to continually create matter in this universe. And I was very fortunate to have met an amazing scientist called Ron Pearson, who had asked that same question and had come up with a completely new theory on the creation of the universe. And what was fascinating was that this whole theory depended on vibrations being at the fundamental level of reality, which he called the subquantum. And that went on to create light on the quantum level, and which went on to create matter on the classical level we see around us. And this is exactly the same as Nikola Tesla was saying: vibration creates light, which creates matter. Now, when you start thinking of that, then God or the universal intelligence is most likely, I think, now working through vibrations at the subquantum level. I mean, just the way that Ron Pearson talks about. And he actually came up with a full theory of quantum gravity. And the reductionists who say that when your brain is dead, your mind is dead, haven't come up with a theory that fits without any flaws. They still rely on the Big Bang theory. They still rely on relativity theory. You don't need those two. There's a far better theory, and that shows us how vibrations are used by the universal consciousness to go on and create the many different worlds of spirit on different frequencies. And having set the scene there, you begin to see the connection between vibrations later on when I go into talk about lays and ley lines. Now, if I could come back to the question that you asked about what is a lay or a ley line or alignment, we must go back to an early observer, because all science starts with observations. And this observer was looking, this is Alfred Watkins, who was looking at why certain sites of interest were always set in a line in the landscape. It could be a church, it could be a standing stone, it could be a holy spring. And he saw these things were natural alignments. Later on, Jean-Michel proposed that there was a particular alignment running across England called the St. Michael alignment, which ran through many churches called Michael and Mary. And then Hamish Miller, the Dowser, dowsed that two lines were entwining their way and crossing over each other along that alignment in their famous book, The Sun and the Serpent. A lot of people at this stage said, this is rubbish, because there are so many sacred sites on the map. There are so many mounds and places of prayer and churches. You could draw lines in any direction running through anything you like. So all this ley line alignment is just balderdash. Well, that argument got chucked out the window when we started looking at what these lines were doing. And so the first definition is you have the alignment, which is also called a ley and also called a ley line by different people. So it all means the same thing. And that's pretty much a straight direction across the line of the landscape. Each of these alignments, if it's a true alignment, will have a pair of earth energy lines running, crossing over, just like the St. Michael alignment has the Michael and Mary line. Now these alignments and these actual energy lines, they have a side-to-side movement that can be measured. It's very slow. It goes one way for about 6 hours and the other way for about 6 hours. But we found after measuring these hourly movements that some of them had different frequencies. And the really slowest moving lines would take 12 hours to go one way and 12 hours to go the other way. And these lines were much rarer. So we call these the type 4 lines. The ones that moved slightly faster were like the type 3s and type 2s and type 1s. So it's a basic, simple classification. And we also recognize that the widths of each of these frequencies was slightly different as well. So as soon as you start looking at the fact that some of these lines are much slower frequency and vibration, and they're much wider, and they go through much more significant sacred sites, you begin to see now there's a reason you can draw lines between specific sites and see where their intersections are and test. If you've got two lines running towards each other, they should intersect at a very, very powerful energy center. And you might find something special there, like a cathedral or an ancient sacred site, which was not known before. So this hypothesis has been tested for years and years now, and more people are finding when they're tracking these lines, they intersect and find a site which has never been known before. So what we are now left with is a series of alignments with different frequencies of energy lines. But we then spotted something interesting, is that 4 times a year, all of these frequencies started moving into exactly the same time. In fact, they all joined up at the same frequency. And they moved one range of movement at one time, and they reached the other end of the range of movement at the same time. So what was causing this to happen? And it happened always the day before the solstices and the equinoxes. So now we've got to start thinking, well, what was the reasoning behind this? And why is it the intersections have something to do with sacredness? There was ancient places of prayer, like stone circles, Templar chapels, and also modern places of prayer. You find this. So, and if you look at a certain place as well, like Montsegur in the south of France, this has been a place where the early Celts held as sacred, then the Romans held as sacred, then the Christians held sacred. It's different religions over millennia held the same place to be sacred. Well, why would one place be sacred? Why not just move down the road 50, 60 meters and build your temple there? No, it was the lines and it was the location that was important. And when you put these vibration energies together and brought people to that place, it in some way enhanced this connection to God that everybody felt. So you're left with thinking, well, what kind of hypothesis could explain this? And if you think about the Earth spinning and the countries moving around with that spin, the lines don't move that far from where they are on land. They just have a small side-to-side movement. So whatever's creating these lines had to stem from within the Earth. And the only explanation that we could find, not only were the lines here, you needed something which was a continuous source of energy. So if this is a frequency, this is not going out off and on. It had to be continuous. And the only possible thing was the inner core of the Earth, which is iron and nickel. Iron and nickel is a very good transducer. It takes one form of energy, converts it to another. And just on the outside, outer core, which is liquid, you have where the electromagnetic field of the Earth is actually said to be created. So you've got this solid nickel transducer sitting inside this liquid outer core, and the electromagnetism has been converted to basically spherical standing waves of vibration. And the inner core is expanding and contracting very, very slowly. To get these side-to-side movements, 12 hours one way, 12 hours the other way, you're talking about microhertz in frequencies. You can't even get down with electrical equipment to below 2,500 microhertz. And even then you need super cool gravimeters buried under the ice in Antarctica to do that. So what we're finding is, what the hypothesis is, that these standing waves of vibrations emanate out through the Earth, bouncing back off the different density levels and vibrations to eventually express themselves on the surface of the Earth. And if you look at the nature of standing waves in a circular environment, they actually express on the surface as linear features. And it's these linear high pressure concentrations of vibrations that we now name as lines. The other interesting thing is that it's not just one frequency of vibration. The inner core is a mechanical filter, and that means it actually expresses a variety of different frequencies with gaps in between them. And this exactly fitted the different frequencies of lines, which move from 12 hours to 16 hours, 24 hours. We have them at 36 and 48 and 72 hours. There's nothing in between. So there's no energy lines with frequencies of 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, or 23 hours. You don't find them until 24 hours comes again. So there's a good chance that the inner core is what's controlling, and it's the size, the density of in iron and nickel, which determines the nature of the frequencies that come out, irrespective of where this source energies come from. And we've got one source energy, which is the outer core and the electromagnetism of the Earth, but there's two other sources of potential energy. One is the sun, and the other is active galactic nuclei out in the universe. And that energy comes in the form of cosmic energy. And when it hits our atmosphere, it creates neutrinos, and neutrinos passes straight through to our inner core, imparting energy, which is transduced as well. And those things, the solar and cosmic energies, produce the larger type 4 lines, and the rarer ones. And the rarest of them all still are the type 5, which we call the emperor dragons. And there were 3 in that, then there became 6. And this is an indication of how much cosmic energy is getting through into our atmosphere from outside the solar system. And that's directly related to how much magnetic field we have, because the magnetic field shields us from these cosmic energies. So we've got this point where now these energy lines are vibrations, very, very low vibrations. And the reason I started off with this question about how God operates and creates the world, it's through vibrations at a subquantum level, according to Ron Pearson's theory. So now you're looking at, well, if it's operating through vibrations, very, very low vibrations, there's a possible link here as to why these intersections on the surface are held to be so sacred, because these seem to be places where people naturally have a much easier connection with to the universal consciousness, and then can go on to achieve some incredible things. And that's when you begin to see, wow, you can meditate on these places or pray on these places, and a variety of outcomes can happen more readily, I would say. So does that answer the question about the ley lines, the alignments? And it's great because now you can find sacred sites, you can see alignments on the map, and then go and investigate, see, well, what type of lines have we got running along them? It means that everyone can dowse, as you said earlier. It's a skill we all have, because dowsing essentially is a communication between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. It's easy enough to learn. You just practice. And for me, teaching people to dowse, getting people to find the energy lines and the sacred sites near to where they are, is the key to beginning to bring together spiritual people into groups at these sites. And that's going to determine a much more positive future in this world.
I would agree wholeheartedly, and I thank you so much for taking like such a breadth of a topic around like the actual science and distilling it down to explain it in such a way that I find is much more easy to digest. And for those that are listening, I will keep in the show notes the reference to Ron Pearson's work, as well as Rory's own book, which is a guide to ley lines, earth energies, nodes, and vortices, and things like that, if anybody wants to take another look at that. There's a couple of things that I wanted to speak to, Rory, that you mentioned with all of that. And one is that the fact that these alignments, or the leys that are connecting through so many of these sacred sites, and they also could be even burial sites as opposed to sites of worship or prayer, we know that people would have gravitated to those areas without any knowledge of what dowsing we're talking about right now. And so my sort of supposition is this knowledge probably was handed down through oral traditions, and also people would have the felt experience on those lines or in those areas where those sacred sites might have been. And we know that a lot of pre-Christian sites that would have had these more formidable energies were then utilized again as the church developed, and they would put a church over an area where there was a higher magnitude of these vibrations, purely because they could also have a knowing or a sensing that there was something powerful there. It expanded consciousness. It helped this elevation of peace, or a felt embodied sense of beauty or grace, or like people would feel more enlivened after being on those areas. So like from a practical standpoint, people would be drawn there. And to me, that speaks of the vibration and the vibrational nature that we are as well as electromagnetic beings and souls that are ultimately on that you said subquantum aspect of existence. We are this vibrational entity, so that we're mingling with this all the time. And so many people are generally unaware of their direct experience to the vibrations of not only earth currents and earth lines, but even just nature itself. So I think that's just a beautiful expansion for people to recognize that, yes, the earth is this vibrational being, if you will, and us as part of it are also receiving what's emanating up from the core of the earth, but also what the earth is receiving from the cosmos, the galactic energies, and the solar energies and the lunar energies. And the fact that you've been able to capture also how these specific earth lines shift according to these time patterns. But also, I know from training with you that the lunar cycles and the solar rhythms or cycles also influence the potency of the lines. Do you maybe want to speak to that a little bit? So that, because sometimes people might say, oh, well, maybe I've connected with this line, but I didn't feel the same thing as I did the last time I was there or on this site. But it might have to do with what time of year it is or what position the sun is at when they're there. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Do you feel that's
Yeah.
relevant?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what you're saying is completely relevant. And I'll try and sort of nip back to some of the things you say to explain this. But the key thing is this vibration, because as you're rightly saying, we also have vibration within us. And the trick is to find resonance. When we resonate our vibrational field with the vibrational field of the earth, that is what really sets you on fire. It's the fast line connection to the universal consciousness. That's easily said. It's not easily to do. In fact, what you mentioned earlier about the divine feminine, it's all part of this bringing back this balance. I won't go into that too much for the moment, but coming back to the significance of these sites and where people are drawn to. Yeah, they like the feeling. But why don't they get it all the time at these sites? And you talk about them being buried. Well, one of the things we find is we don't find burials at the really important sacred sites. Like where they held rituals, where they held ceremonies, was not quite the exact place for the burials. What you find is that on the lines that lead towards these intersections, you find the burial mounds on the lines very close to these intersections or nodes. And they buried them on the lines because this was where the soul could then travel along them to the node and go up through the portal at the node to the worlds of spirit, the world of the ancestors, and everything that Ron Pearson's theories explain, which, of course, modern science hates the idea of.
Yes. I know another term for that is a ghost line. Would that be correct?
Yeah. There's cultures all around the world knew the same thing. They called it different words. You know, the Aboriginals called the song lines, and they would go to the Dreamtime sites, which is the same thing as the lines and the notes. So the ceremonial aspect is centered around the sacred site itself, the actual intersection. And when you go there, it's not always the same. And when you start measuring energy, not just on a two-dimensional basis every hour, but you start measuring it on a vertical basis above the ground and below ground with something called vertical predictive dowsing, you begin to see how the three-dimensional energy shape at the node can vary and change over the time. And the moments where you get the greatest potential resonance are when the earth energies form this double torus, the upper ring of the double torus, which is like a donut shape, sits just half above and half below the surface. So it's like a big cauldron. And that's exactly the same torus vortex shaped energy that our human aura actually has.
Yes.
So you can see two similar shapes. And how easy that now could be for it to start connecting with between the two. And the interesting thing about the toroidal energy field is that energy is two ways through the torus. And it's the same two ways of energy that we have to balance within us to resonate at a frequency, which is the higher harmonic of that toroidal field. When we've learned to do that, we have that connection. And this is why a lot of these sacred sites were always known as distant learning centers, because this is where you go to learn and develop and grow. And the growing is the key to all life. In fact, that's the key to the development in the universe, because everything living grows. And our ancestors who used to go to these places knew that when they connected to source consciousness, they could connect to their ancestors. They could connect to this infinite awareness for information and answers to their questions. And that begun to have relevance. And you might think, well, how do you get an answer to a question? Well, it's the same as tapping into your subconscious for answers. And artists do this all around the world. They with their art, they start with imagination and they go and looking for inspiration and then receive intuition, insights. And the greats like Carl Jung discovered this when he's in visualizations. Rudolf Steiner discovered this, and wonderful painters like Dali would use his art to try and answer a question. These distant learning centers were not places you always had to go, but when it's your turn to come back, or when the tribes turn to come back every 4 years, they'd migrate along these lines, and they were often marked by marker stones to show them the way. And they'd come back for these huge gatherings and connections to source consciousness. And they always did this at the times of the year when these double torus shapes would form. But and this was always at the day before the solstice and the equinoxes, which was the ancient Hebrew holy day called the Tekufa, the last day of the sun cycle. Of course, everyone remembers the first day of the new sun cycle, which is it's just now the solstices and the equinoxes, because it's the day of celebration. Like summer solstice is the feast of St. John. But of course, the whole day before they were praying and meditating like mad for healthy kids and all that sort of thing.
Right.
It made a difference. They could hold balance within themselves and to create balance in their surroundings. So if they need water for their plants because there was a drought, there was an imbalance in the land. So you go within and you rebalance yourself, and what you do within shows without. And this is the key thing we're learning today about how we can bring back balance to this world. By going within collectively. And this is something we've got a lot more to learn on. This whole group meditation is a deep dive into the unknown. And we're beginning to know more and more about it, but it's not going to be given to any one person. It's not going to be given to any one group. We have to sort of get lots of groups finding out about this.
Right. Well, I love this so much, Rory, and probably we'll spend the last little bit of the podcast maybe sharing about this because this feels what is most relevant in this time. That whole idea that people have for thousands and thousands of years congregated to these areas that help them reconnect with a more coherent state within themselves, and then have an elevation or an expansion of awareness that help them come to new ideas or new solutions, and even just being in balance themselves individually and as a collective that would influence their capacity to work together, to create new ideas, new solutions, to see life in it with new lenses, I suppose. And what I'm seeing happening in the work that I'm doing, and on a individual level in the women's work and also the earth work, is that we are inviting this return to the wisdom within, and the time of the hierarchy is over. It's like we all have key pieces of wisdom for not only our own state of balance and health and happiness, but we hold this unique vibration and wisdom that can benefit each other. But its greatest benefit is when we're sharing it all together, because it all is like this interlocking, beautiful tapestry. And you mentioned about congregating on some of these more powerful intersections of the lines, which you've referred to as both nodes, but also as these places of knowledge. Because when we're all coming into resonance and having expansion in the vibrational field, then there's even more expansion in the collective there together. So there's more access and more access and more access to deeper wisdom from the subconscious or the collective consciousness. And two things from that I'd love to share is when I connected with you and you gave me the assignment before I came and trained with you to try to locate one of these sets of type 4 lines and a node in the province of Mi'kma'ki, Nova Scotia. I was like, okay, holy cats, here we go. And I won't go into the process of the location of it. But when I did find it, the lines and find the node, and I hadn't had the experience yet about finding the center of the node with a group, which we'll speak about together here in a moment. But even when I found that energy nodal area, I'm very sensitive to energy. A lot of the people that I work with are also very open to that and want to have a direct relationship with energy and that of the land and nature around them. And when I sat down to meditate, I wanted to have communion with the space. The moment I sat down, my root chakra and my crown chakra just instantly went into this balanced state. And it was like I could feel that toroidal field just like open and balanced. Like it was so instantaneous. And I think I remember sharing with you, I also had this vision of this rainbow dragon just like accelerate out of my crown chakra, a very psychic experience. But my experience and my belief, I would also say, is that Gaia, the Earth Mother, is calling to us to return to a deeper, reverent, sacred connection with her. And with that, it's a symbiotic relationship. We will learn from her how to do this next phase of humanity. It will help us bridge the gap that we've had for such a long time of feeling so separated from the wisdom that nature is and us as a reflection of nature. And then I had the beautiful experience of the training with you where you had us gather in Bath in southern England and had all of us that were training with you to go and look for the center of the node near Bath Abbey. And everyone's going off in different directions with their dowsing rods. And you could see people sort of having this moment of looking around and like, shouldn't we be all going in the same direction, right? To find the same thing. And this is that preconditioned thought that we have about how life works in a more linear sort of way and the power of suggestion. Like, oh, if we're all looking for the same thing, we should find it all in the same spot. But anyway, so everybody got in their zone and they're all going in a different direction. And then we all found our indicators with the rods, which is X marks the spot. We have our found thing that we'd set out and intended to find. And we were all standing in a perfect circle. And we were opposite one another. And I had that same experience when I took the group and two people that had never dowsed before that I taught on the spot how to use rods. And we had the exact same experience at this node here in the southern part of the province. So I'd love to perhaps end our time together with you explaining this unique experience of finding the center and how that's related to this new embodiment of consciousness right now on the planet.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And you forgot to mention that wonderful bit of feedback you had after you had your first solo experience at the node there.
Oh, yeah.
Nature,
Yes.
nature,
Yes. Should I
nature
share
gave
that?
you that sign.
Yes, I'll share that really, really quickly because that was so beautiful. Before I found the node, I had found one of the lines, and then the second trip that I took down to the area, I found the second one. And I was testing the width of the line and testing the frequency, the rate of flow on the edges. And also then I needed to find the center of the line in order to find the node. And so I was found my way to the center of the line, standing in the middle of this beach road. It's 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And I'm standing there with my rods and I was looking down at the rods and then I looked up and here was an adult bobcat coming out of the woods, out of the ditch, looking straight at me about 15 feet away and walked all the way across the road, keeping eye contact with me. And not only was that significant in that I was like, oh, I've absolutely found it. Like nature, the Earth Mother had said, yes, you've got it. Because you would never see a bobcat in the daylight like that, let alone on a main beach road, that there would be traffic on a nice day like that on a Sunday. Anyway, the other part of that was that my shamanic journey guide is a puma. When I do my journey work to the lower world, it's always been the panther or the puma. And so I knew, oh, I found it. I love that you bring that back because I used to have my spirit bumps even talking about it. It was so relevant that nature, the wisdom, the intelligence of all that is always communicating with us. And when we're in right relationship, that communication gets stronger, doesn't it?
I really wanted you to mention it because it's such an important part of what I'm about to say, because nature provides us with feedback. We need something to tell us when we're on the right track. And when we start looking at working out why we have 6 perhaps different people all in a circle around in a node, you find that you're beginning to realize just how a group of people who are all independently individual sovereigns work so much more effectively when they share information as a group on what they perceive. And this can work in dreams, it can work in meditation, and it can work in dialogue. The perspective that each person has is unique. And the insights they get are unique to them because they may be more kinesthetic and other people may be more visual, maybe other people may be more auditory. So we're beginning to learn about each other. And by learning about each other's abilities and skills and functions, you learn about where your weaknesses are, and it makes you want to become a better person and grow those weaknesses. But amongst the circle of the 6 and learning how we work in a node, you begin to realize how some people are tailor-made towards certain functions with regards to working with energy. You'll get those who can create and work with vortexes. You can create those who can work with the vertical balance. There are those who move it around. There are those who can anchor it. And each of those are functions within group meditation that we're still learning more about. But when you start looking at art or a prophecy, you can study it for hours on your own, but it's when you start listening to how other people perceive that same prophecy, those same dreams, the symbolism sparks, because the necessary ambiguity in that symbolism means different things for different people. And when you share all of that information, what is 2-dimensional to you really becomes 3-dimensional. And when you start sharing the insights that you get from each of you, that ambiguity begins to dissolve, and the message that comes through from the group is absolutely the message the group needs at that moment in time. And invariably, it leads to synchronicities and nature giving you feedback. And that's absolutely beautiful. I've worked with groups now, and I'm still staggered at some of the things which come out of it, which you yourself can't possibly ever hope to achieve. And that tells us one thing: we're moving back into a group environment, and this links with what Steiner and the other great people are saying. We're moving back into group consciousness, and that means we need to work in groups. This is another reason why the old order is dying now. We're moving away from centralization to decentralization. There's nothing they can do to stop it. Mm-hmm. The spiritual war is what we're in. And the way to win it is to decentralize into working groups and work with the energies at these sites, and the universal consciousness will guide us through, and they'll teach us what we need to learn. But groups is everything.
Exactly. I fully agree. And I'm seeing that even in the work that I'm doing. And every time there's a circle of women that we gather, everyone has something to share that the other possibly has needed to hear. And it's the collective experience of the group that reveals the greater teachings for everyone, always, always, always. And I remember you saying that in order to find the center together, we need to find our own center. And yet we we are best able to do that when we are connected together. That experience helps us to do that.
If it wasn't for better meditators, I wouldn't have become better myself.
Right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you're grouped with people who have a higher skill, you seem to be entrained up with their interaction of it all. So we can learn an awful lot from the group as well as the universal consciousness. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm committed to get people to find the sacred sites and to gather on them, and that seems to be my goal, as well as trying to understand what we need to be doing.
I mean, I would love to speak with you more about so much in relation to all of this, but I know we honor the Earth time as we have it. Would you like to speak a little bit about when you're talking about these group gatherings, the meditations, and I know people can reach out to me about one of the local sites, and we've even done that remotely when the weather hasn't been great. We've reconnected to the node at a distance, which is something you've spoke about as well in some of the teachings that you share on your website and in the Sacred Sites Network. I'd love to just leave maybe on that note, if you'd like to share a little bit about what the Sacred Sites Network is, because that's a relatively new creation that you've been offering the world. And also, just before that, everyone, I will include Rory's email address. And of course, you can contact me directly if you want to know about local places if you're in Nova Scotia. Would you like to share what the Sacred Sites Network is? And then we'll close from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda. It's just the sacrednetwork.org, and it's got a sites map there. You can join groups, form groups, and the idea is to be interactive, to find where your nearest event is. You can start meditation circles and run a meditation events, and the map shows you where the nearest sacred site is to you. And we're putting more sacred sites up there when we can. There's a lot more to go up. Right now, the site is actually may not be available for a day or two more still because it's undergoing some renovations. And we're looking at actually building a completely new site, which is going to be much more enhanced with more functionality, more interactions. Hopefully that'll be done towards the end of the year. So that's one port of call. Hopefully it'll just draw people towards meeting new friends and like-minded friends. And I think that's one of the great highlights of it is you meet such wonderful people who are awakened. Yeah. They get it. They're not judgmental. They know what's going on. They want to go with the flow, and it's a great line of work to be in.
It is. It really is. And I love what you were referring to also about the decentralization. I mean, I feel like what is also happening is a move away from herd mentality and back to community and reverence for both the sovereign individual, but the absolute beauty and need for that collective living again. And to me, that's coming back to these matriarchal ways, really, of the unique blessing of each individual and how we co-create together. So thank you again for taking your evening to join us for this episode. And I certainly would love to have you on again. And so we'll just see if that aligns and technology agrees with us and synchronicity happens. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart for joining us today.
Thank you for all you're doing as well, Amanda. It's wonderful to see your own investigations and your own work at this. And that's if I can support that in some way, I will. I'd love to. Thank you very much.
So for all of you listening here today on Flight of the Feminine, if you're keen to start your own journey with dowsing, you can certainly check out Rory's website and mine, and for upcoming trainings, for resources of books. And Rory has a plethora of published books and other links and resources that will really be supportive. And if those of you are in the area, I also am teaching just sort of intro level 1 to dowsing, and that'll get you started even connecting with your own energy, your intuition, learning about what we were talking about the subconscious and the conscious state of awareness. and just reach out. And please make sure to like and share this episode if it's something you think others would be interested in. And thanks again for listening, and many, many blessings to all of you. It's time, my sisters, to elevate your mind, expand your feminine heart, explore your inner wisdom. Let's soar together. Sending you all big, big love.
This is Story Studio Network.